why would a group of liberal intellectuals or politicians or media stars or whatever, why would they sit around and decide to dismember or dilute the criminal justice system if they thought in advance that it would raise the amount of criminality?
Oh, they didn't think that, but the point is,
they just thought wrongly that it would help.
Yes, but it would also give them an enormously larger role than they had before. And in fact, if you bring them up evidence, they'll say, but things would have been even worse had we not done this. Similarly with the war on poverty, you can show how dependency on government was going down, poverty was going down before this program was ever put in. And within a few years, dependence on government was going up, and after a few more years, the absolute number of people in poverty was going up.
Yeah, I read that in your book, but the absolute number of poverty is not the data. The relevant data would be the rate of poverty.
Oh,
and the rate of poverty, in fact, in the 1970s, I worked for President Johnson, so we have to establish there. You know, so I mean, the line we took was that during the 1960s, during the Kennedy-Johnson administration, poverty did in fact go down sharply. And then the rate since then, not the absolute number because the country has grown larger, the rate has sort of bounced around at about flat, somewhere between 12 and 15%.
Yes, but don't forget, this was sold to the country not on the grounds that if you transferred money from A to B, that B would have more money. That was not the argument. The argument was that dependency would be reduced, that you would, quote, invest in people, as Bill Clinton is now saying, now that people have forgotten what was said in the 60s. This will then, you give them job training and all those kinds of things, parenting skills, the whole bit. And this will then be an investment that will pay off in the future because there'll be fewer people dependent upon the government than there were before. And I go through a great number of people from John F. Kennedy to Lyndon Johnson, the New York Times, again, all the usual suspects. Said all these things.
Lyndon Johnson was not a usual suspect, Tom.
Well, he was the primary suspect. All right. But the fact is, that was never tested. And when there were all these wonderful retrospectives held down in Texas and other places about this, the first order of business is to evade the criterion that they themselves set up when they set this out. And so no matter what happens, if it's a failure by the original criterion, then we just find another criterion by which it will be a success.
A lot of the things that came out of the Great Society, I mean, building all those junior colleges and community colleges.
Oh, I would disagree entirely. I think that was a tragedy of the first magnitude.
That was a tragedy.
Yes.
Why is that a tragedy?
You have millions of people who have absolutely no desire for an education, using up billions of dollars of the taxpayers' money, and not only not getting an education themselves, making it more difficult to give an education to those people who came to college with an idea of getting one.
Now, you say they have no desire for an education. I mean, nobody is herding them into these community colleges and into the junior colleges and into the state universities. I mean, they have a desire, obviously.
No, they do not, obviously, because lots of things go on in those places that are not education. I mean, where else can you find so many young people of the same age and opposite sex in one place? A nice, convenient place to be. But anyone who is taught in a lot of these places, this ferocious desire for education as such is not terribly visible. And I taught at places where we've gotten, you know, the upper 10, 15% of students. I mean, UCLA and whatnot. Neither I nor my colleagues found this great desire for education as such. They wanted to be in ivy-covered buildings for 4 years in order to get more money when they graduate and have a good time while they're there.
So you think the great American ideal, which has really been shared by both parties and both ideologies over recent decades, to allow more people to get into higher education, that is a bankrupt idea?
Oh, to allow is one thing, but to subsidize people at enormous cost with no real sign that this is producing what we intend to produce.
When you say subsidized, I mean, you talk about a junior college, a community college. I guess that's subsidized. It's below cost tuition, but it does allow kids who do not have the money to go to Amherst or wherever to start a college education. I mean,
people did that before the Great Society. I did it before the Great Society. My whole generation did it before the Great Society.
You are saying that the great humanitarian political impulses of the 1960s have been almost without exception bad.
Well, there have been some good ones, but I'm saying that the assumption that on the education front, I mean, I would defy you to find a large number of people who've actually taught these students who really think that they're out there thirsting for knowledge.
Well, if you suppose they are thirsting for a better job, and we've set up a society where you have to be credentialed with a certain amount of college, so aren't they able to get a better job?
No,
because
this is the fallacy of composition. You know, if one person stands up in the stadium, he sees the game better. But if they all stand up, they don't all see the game better. As long as, you know, if you have a degree and the other guy doesn't, then you get ahead of him in the employment line. But we're not going to all get ahead of each other in the employment line by all getting degrees.
So this whole idea that I guess, again, both liberals and conservatives are saying is that at this particular moment, 1995, we have to get more people into the education system because that's the way to compete, and we look at the data and we see that the people with more education are earning more money than ever before relative to the people with less education. That's all a fallacy of everybody standing up in the stadium.
People who fly on the Concorde, kids who've flown on the Concorde undoubtedly will make more money than kids who've only gone on buses. That does not mean if we put a lot of people on the Concorde, we're going to raise the national income. You can't blame the crime rate on the fact that there's more poverty, there's less poverty, there's more affluence. It's not due to foreigners because, as you say, we've won the Cold War. All the normal things that you might blame all this on aren't there. It's not because of diseases, because science has conquered more diseases. It's all because of self-inflicted wounds. And I'm saying these are the people who inflicted those wounds, and this is why we shouldn't listen to them anymore.
What are the nature of those wounds?
Crime.
No.
The disintegration of the family. The disintegration of the educational system. And it's not going to matter. We'll be like the man who gained the whole world and lost his soul.
Is there a common root to all of those problems, other than you heard them from the anointed class? I mean, is there something? Is it big, is it big government? Is it big government? Is that what?
No. It's the notion that ordinary people cannot be trusted to make the decisions that they've been making, but these must be preempted either by judges in the case of crime, by the schools taking over the indoctrination of other people's children behind their back and against their protests, or what was the other one? The family, taking money from the taxpayers and subsidizing behavior, as well as encouraging it and legitimizing behavior that has turned out to be enormously self-destructive, undermining the family in 1,000 different ways.